welcome to Future Campus. We've got 5 minutes with Ngiare Brown, recently installed as the Chancellor of James Cook University. Her CV is way too long for us to cover in the 5 minutes, so I'll simply say she has had an extraordinary career in medicine and many other areas. Ngiare, welcome.
Thanks so much, Tim. Great to be here.
Now, can you tell us, when you were growing up, was it your lifelong dream to be a Chancellor?
Unless you're a Star Wars fan and you associate Chancellors with Palpatine, then no, it was my lifelong dream actually to do medicine and to be a doctor. So even as a very young sort of munchkin in primary school, and for reasons we haven't quite pinpointed, I really had a passion for medicine. And so I was fortunate enough that I had family and community that said, we'll support you absolutely, as long as you know then that you have to work for it. Work hard, do certain things, do well at school and just apply yourself. And so I had the support to then be able to do that, and opportunities opened up for me along the way. So perhaps the universe also wanted me to do medicine. And so there I was. And one of the great things about medicine is that there are so many doors and windows and networks and other opportunities that are associated with that degree that can take you anywhere. And in the realms of Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander and Indigenous health, it seems to be where I found my home. But in terms of whether I aspired to the role of Chancellor, I don't think that ever crossed my mind. Universities aren't necessarily fond of me in that sense. So it was really it was a surprise, but a real honour and, of course, a privilege, not only to be considered for the role, but then to be appointed to the role.
So taking you back to that childhood stream of consciousness and aspiration, you were the first identified Aboriginal medical graduate from New South Wales. How hard is it to be the first? Because you've had a lot of firsts in your life.
You know what? That's not how I remember it. So, it's nice to be the first. And so, but I look to people like, say, Helen Milroy, the first identified medical graduate that we know of in the entire country. She's an extraordinary woman. People like Noel Heyman, for example, and there were a handful of others in the rest of the country. But so on the one hand, to be first it's a fantastic kind of something to have alongside your name. But on the other hand, it's like, well, I finished medicine in 1991. So I think that's a bit of an indictment on the system whereby we had to wait that long in order for there to be someone to come through and to graduate medicine from New South Wales. So there's that. But I don't, apart from, if you're an athlete and you're competing in that sense, it's not about being the first, but I think about opportunity and choice. And that's certainly what my parents told me. So I think that's important for our children and our community members, and for people like myself then to ensure that those opportunities and that choice exists for others. Because I think that you'll find, there's nothing super special about me really in the grand scheme of things. Our communities are full of potential, full of intellect and passion and talent, but we need the platforms whereby that choice opportunity is available to them as well.
So as your career progressed, you became a doctor, the founding member of the Australian Indigenous Doctors Association, then chair of the National Mental Health Commission, a whole lot of other roles. How hard has it been to hold on to continuing practice?
Yeah, it's a really tough juggle, to be honest. And I'm not claiming that I'm doing it particularly well, but luckily enough, I've got some great people that work with me. They support me. I trust them to be able to do the work now that I have, other things. But having said that, for me, it's always been important to maintain a diversity of work. I can't do the same thing day in, day out. I like to be challenged. I like it's kind of like creativity, I think, to be able to work in different spaces. But it's very important for me in order to remain grounded and to maintain any kind of degree of, and I won't say expertise, but experience in something that I am passionate about, and that's child and adolescent wellbeing. I need that clinical connection so that I'm not just another talking head. I'm able to relate to the children and the families and the work that I advocate on behalf of. So for me, it's very grounding and it's very important, but I also need to be able to be doing other work in policy, in research, for example, in that clinical translation and implementation space, in politics, because of course we're all dragged into that eventually. So I'm blessed to be able to patchwork quilt together some of those diverse activities.
You were invested as the 6th Chancellor of James Cook University. You were clearly appointed because of your CV, which is diverse, but perhaps you got a lot of headlines as well because you're Indigenous. How challenging is that, or how much of an advantage is it that you're singled out because you're Indigenous?
You know what? I am incredibly proud of who I am as an Aboriginal woman. And that is something that has been, part of every breath for me, and certainly instilled within me from my family from a very young age. So as soon as I, could understand who I was from that perspective, absolutely. So that is I would like to think that's one of my strengths, and it's a real anchor for me, that cultural identity, that connection, and not just within Australia, but globally. So to be considered for the role, there's that, but perhaps to be identified because I'm an Aboriginal woman, clinician, mother, whatever else. Yeah, absolutely. I think it is an advantage. I would hope, of course, that they needed to take into consideration my other capacities because, that's, like I said, it wasn't the first thing that, sort of I think of when I wake up of a morning, oh, one day I'd like to be Chancellor. It's to be considered, even to be part of the selection process. It really got me thinking about other opportunities and how, if I were to be successful, what it could then mean in terms of what I have to offer to the role. Does that make sense, hon? It's not what it offers me, it's what I offer the role, what I can do for the institution and for the communities that it serves. That's what's important to me. And I've had the real privilege of having relationships in that space and that geography for a whole number of years, particularly in Aboriginal health. So for me to then have, the chance to revisit that, it was very exciting.
So looking into that, chancellors have a complex role. You've got to sort of provide governance and get involved to some degree in strategic direction. And it's a question of, how far do you get involved? What do you hope to achieve?
So in addition to supporting and what's the word I'm after? So prosecuting the strategic direction already identified by the institution and providing some of that sort of governance leadership in the role, I certainly, as part of my engagement, talked about my desire to strengthen that, particularly in the region and in far north Queensland, but to extend the reach and the scope of the work of the institution to a national platform, which of course they're already working on. But, wouldn't it be nice if we were the provider of choice for training in regional, rural and remote stuff, health in particular, but also, you have a reputation, James Cook has a reputation for biodiversity, bioconservation, reef science, all those sorts of fun things. That's outstanding. And to be able to elevate that, but also then to be able to extend that to the Pacific more broadly, and not just in Southeast Asia where we already have a footprint, but more broadly into the Pacific. And, wouldn't it be nice to be a provider of choice for Indigenous peoples of the Pacific and beyond? We already recruit for students from, mainland US and Canada and the UK, for example, why not Indigenous peoples? And as a provider of choice with a very strong cultural identity for a range of other populations, I think would be fantastic. Attract WHO, like collaborating centre status, or to be an office for some of the Pacific work. A real focus on Indigenous health, traditional knowledges, education and intellectual property. It's all there. It's how we then elevate and then extend that work.
That's an excellent explanation. In fact, it's pretty clear that it's very fresh in your mind right now. I guess brand new in the job. Like, you're about 1 month in at this point. Any observations on what the job is like for you?
There's a lot of busy work and meeting people, which of course is part of my responsibility, and that's been really enjoyable and exciting. And again, that kind of the creativity. I have to maintain certain relationships. I'm hoping to strengthen and or create new relationships. So there's that. I got to say, though, there'll also be some of the, the wine and canapé kind of moments. And my hubby laughed because he said, there'll be all this sort of hobnobbing stuff that you'll need to do, which you hate. I get up early, I go to bed early, but, sometimes we adapt depending upon the environment, and hence we survive and we evolve. But I'm hoping to at least be able to lay the groundwork for some of this, because it's a 5-year appointment, which in the grand scheme of things is going to be gone really quickly. So how do I make the most of what we have now, and lay some of the groundwork? There'll be some low-hanging fruit for right now, but I like to play the long game. So what is it that I can do now that will support and promote the work into the future? I'm also very much of the mind, there's an Indigenous cultural perspective, and you may have heard of it. It's called 7 Generations. So we need to be thinking about what we're doing now, our words, our actions, our policies, our resourcing, how we engage in the community. It's not just how it affects us now or even our families and our children, but what could be the potential impacts 7 generations henceforth? And are we making the right kinds of decisions that will support healthy kind of participatory futures for them as well?
That's a great link to, one of your great passions. You set up the Ngiare Foundation. Why did you do that?
Oh, well, I love working with children. Children are great. Adults drive me nuts. But the reason that we established Ngiare in the first instance, I was working for another agency, one of the peak bodies for the community controlled sector at the time, I think. And it just so happened that during the course of a week, so about 5 days, I received multiple phone calls and bumped into people at, I think it was a conference somewhere, and they were different people in different places at different times during the course of that week. But they were all about the same community, strangely enough. So I thought, well, this can't be a coincidence. Unfortunately, it was about all the dreadful things happening in community: drug use, sexual assault, child abuse, neglect, dysfunction. So I thought, well, I can't not do something about this then. So I thought, look, I don't know what it is that I'm going to do, but I started visiting, and I had a connection with this community in this region, again, from another lifetime, such as the joy of Aboriginal affairs. And we had some community town hall meetings, and everybody got a bit excited about at least having a conversation about these about these significant social and wellbeing issues in the community. And from that, then I thought, well, I can't now not do something for community. And I don't know what that's going to be, but I can't, I had some mates who owed me some favors. So I grabbed a, pediatrician and a couple of others, a psychologist, and we just started going regularly, once a month, to touch base. And we had been invited, because we only go where we're invited, we started at a school, and we went once a month. And it just started from there. And I thought, well, maybe I'll get to then consolidate some of this work. And so I, incorporated Ngiare as a not-for-profit, so we could then look to attract some resourcing to then get some work done. And so now we've been doing that outreach for 7 or 8 years. We'll be doing the same thing in far north Queensland now that I'll be located there half time, and revisiting relationships, like I said, from other lifetimes. We've got a clinic here in Wollongong, so that's a place-based clinic. We take referrals from the Illawarra, Shoalhaven and southern Sydney. We do research work. We have other consultancy, like doing regionally based child safety and implementation plans. So everything to do with child and adolescent social and emotional well-being, mental health and community level safety.
So in between medicine, the Ngiare Foundation and James Cook, what do you do in your downtime?
Well, I like to spend some time with my children, but they're all getting a little bit older now, and I'm getting a little bit more boring for them. But, one's doing nursing and the other one's still in high school, and they're all busy with their things. But I'd love to just do nothing at home if I have the opportunity, which is rare. Otherwise, I find the water quite therapeutic. So I swim and I paddle outrigger canoes. So
fantastic. Well, Ngiare, that sounds like a exhausting but inspirational life. Thank you so much for a little insight into it, and best of luck at James Cook.
Thanks so much, hon. I've really enjoyed the time, and I'll see you around the traps.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
See you, honey.
Yeah.